Hey, my Reddit story lovers. Welcome back to Bedtime Blocks. Tonight's story is a tense and emotional ride about office betrayal, manipulation, and the haunting fallout of choices we can't take back. It's a journey through paranoia, guilt, and the thin line between justice and revenge. So settle in, get comfortable, and let this one pull you into every twist and every secret that refuses to stay buried. You ever do something you can't take back? Something that felt justified in the moment, but the fallout keeps circling back in your head like a broken record? That's where I'm at right now. I got her fired, and even though part of me says she deserved it, another part keeps whispering that I might have gone too far. It started at the office, the kind of beige-walled, stale coffee-smelling environment where time feels slower than it should. The hum of the fluorescent lights always sat just above the edge of silence, and the carpet was worn in that particular shade of gray that hides every stain, but somehow still looks perpetually dirty. I'd been working there for almost 3 years, tucked away in my cubicle, keeping my head down, trying to avoid unnecessary drama. But drama has a way of finding you, especially when it wears a smile and pretends to be your friend. Her name was Claire. On the surface, she was the kind of person everyone liked. She had that ability to laugh at the boss's worst jokes, to glide through meetings with an air of confidence that made her seem untouchable. People said she was charming. I thought she was dangerous, because beneath that charm was something sharper, something that could cut you open if you weren't careful. The first time I realized it was personal was a Tuesday morning. I walked into the break room and heard her laughing with someone from accounting. I didn't catch the whole sentence, but I heard my name and the words lazy and lucky to even have a job. She said it with that same bright smile she used on clients, like tearing me down was just another casual conversation over burnt coffee. That laugh stuck with me all day, humming louder than the lights above my desk. At first, I told myself to let it go. People talk. Offices are filled with whispers and side eyes, and if you let every one of them get under your skin, you'd never survive. But this was different. It kept happening. A comment here, a snide remark there, always delivered sweetly enough that if I confronted her, she could shrug and say, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way." It was gaslighting dressed in business casual. By the end of that month, I was done pretending I didn't notice. And that's when the plan began forming in my head. Quiet but steady, like a storm building far off in the distance. The funny thing about storms is you always think you'll have time to prepare before they hit. But with Claire, the clouds gathered fast. She knew how to play the room, how to position herself just right so she always looked like the reliable one, the one who had it all under control. Meanwhile, she left little landmines in my path, tiny mistakes blown out of proportion, reports she forgot to forward until it was almost too late, deadlines she shifted just enough to make me look careless. I could feel the ground shifting under me, and I knew if I didn't find a way to push back, I'd be the one who went under. One night, sitting at my desk long after most people had gone home, I caught a glimpse of her real self. She was in the conference room, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharper than I'd ever heard it in public. Through the glass, her face looked different. Tight, annoyed, stripped of the friendly mask she wore during the day. I don't know who she was talking to, but every word dripped with contempt. "They're idiots," she said, pacing the length of the table. "I'm the only reason this place runs." She didn't even notice me, sitting in the half-light of my cubicle watching. That was the first moment I thought, what if I use her own game against her? I didn't move on it right away. For weeks, I just carried that thought with me, like a secret stone in my pocket. But every time she smirked when my boss questioned one of my reports, every time she made a sly remark about how some people just aren't cut out for detail-oriented work, the stone grew heavier. And eventually I realized I wasn't going to just carry it forever. I was going to throw it. So I started collecting, quietly, patiently, emails she sent with little digs that could look unprofessional if shown in the right light. Slack messages where she shifted blame with just enough subtlety to make her seem innocent. unless you had the full thread. Even overheard conversations jotted down in a private document I titled Insurance. I told myself it wasn't revenge, it was protection. But late at night, when I read through the file, I knew I was preparing for war. And in the end, I didn't have to fire the first shot. She did. It happened on a Wednesday morning, one of those gray ones where the clouds hang low and the office feels like it's drowning in recycled air. I had just settled in with my coffee, scrolling through emails when my boss, Daniel, appeared at the edge of my cubicle. His tone was clipped, his brow tight. "Can I see you in my office for a moment?" The pit in my stomach formed instantly. Walking behind him felt like a slow march to the gallows. Inside, he slid a printout across his desk. One of my project reports, except half the data was missing. "This went out to the client yesterday," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried that disappointed weight that stings more than yelling. "Claire caught it, thankfully, but we can't afford mistakes like this." My heart hammered. I knew I hadn't sent that version. I'd triple-checked it. But there it was, printed in black and white, making me look incompetent. I stammered something about checking my files, but Daniel's eyes had already moved past me toward the stack of folders on his desk. The conversation was over. Back at my desk, I dug into the report. And there it was, plain as day. The original file on my computer showed the correct data, while the version that had been forwarded to the client was butchered. I checked the metadata. The edits weren't mine. The timestamps didn't match my logins, and that's when the truth hit me like a freight train. Claire had gotten into my file. It wasn't just sabotage anymore, it was a setup. That night, I sat in the glow of my laptop screen long after midnight, staring at the insurance folder I'd been building. My hands trembled, not from fear but from resolve. She wanted to play dirty? Fine. I was done waiting for her to bury me. It was time to put my plan in motion. But the thing about starting a war is that once you make the first move, you don't get to stop the avalanche. I began with the emails. Weeks of little comments that I'd brushed off now looked like daggers on the screen. Just fixing what Leo missed, again. Not sure how we'd manage without someone double-checking these things, right? Always CCing the right people. Always wrapped in sugar so no one would see the poison until I pointed it out. Next, the Slack threads. Out of context, they seemed harmless, but when I lined them up in order, the pattern was undeniable. Claire consistently shifted responsibility away from herself and onto me, even when the task had been hers. Like the time the client presentation crashed mid-call, she wrote, "Leo must not have updated the deck in time." Except I had the time-stamped files, proving she never uploaded the revised version. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And it wasn't just about me anymore. I noticed she'd thrown others under the bus too. Small slights, quiet manipulations that left her shining in the boss's eyes while everyone else carried invisible bruises. The next step was tricky. I needed a trigger, something undeniable, so I baited her. I accidentally left a draft proposal accessible in the shared folder, missing some key data. Just enough for her to pounce. And she did. By the next morning, Daniel was calling me into his office again with that same disappointed frown. Except this time I smiled, because the version she had tampered with still had the digital fingerprint of her edits. I handed Daniel a neat printed packet, emails, messages, and a comparison of the file logs. My voice stayed calm, almost detached, as I explained the pattern. At first he looked skeptical. Claire had worked hard to build her image. But as he flipped through the pages, his expression shifted. "Are you saying she's been sabotaging you?" he asked finally. I didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. The fallout was swift. Daniel called HR into the loop, and by that afternoon, Claire was summoned to a closed-door meeting. No one knew exactly what was being said inside, but the silence that fell over the office was deafening. Even the printers seemed to stop whirring. I sat at my desk trying to focus on my work, but my ears strained toward that conference room door. 30 minutes passed, then 45. When it finally opened, Claire walked out with her face pale and her eyes hard. She didn't look at anyone. She just grabbed her bag, her steps clipped and quick, and headed for the exit. By the end of the day, the whispers had already started. Did she quit? No, I think she was fired. Something about misconduct. People speculated, but no one asked me directly. They didn't need to. The weight of what I'd done sat heavy on my chest, even as I kept my face neutral. That night, lying in bed, I thought I'd feel relief. Justice? Victory? But instead, the silence of my apartment pressed in on me. The image of her walking out, not smug, not laughing, just broken, replayed in my mind. I told myself she deserved it, that she brought it on herself. But the line between revenge and justice had blurred so much that I wasn't sure anymore which side of it I stood on. And then the phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I know what you did. My blood ran cold when I read that message. I know what you did. No name, no context. Just 6 words glowing in the dim light of my phone screen. My first thought was Claire, that she'd somehow managed to slip in one last knife twist before disappearing. But the number wasn't hers. I knew it by heart after months of copied emails and logged calls. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was spam. Maybe it was just one of those scam texts fishing for a reaction. But deep down, I knew better. The timing was too perfect. The next morning at work, the atmosphere was thick, like the air after lightning splits the sky. People avoided talking about Claire openly, but her absence left a vacuum, and everyone knew something ugly had filled it. Daniel stopped by my desk briefly. "Good work on the Jacobs account," he said, too casually, but his eyes lingered on me for a second longer than usual, as if he was weighing something. I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach lurched. Around lunch, another message came. She deserved it, right? My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my sandwich. I didn't reply. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of traffic outside my window. Guilt clawed at me, but so did paranoia. Who was watching? Who knew? And why did it feel less like a threat and more like someone was testing me, waiting for me to admit what I'd done, even if only in silence? The third message arrived just past midnight. It's not over. Sleep didn't come at all. Days passed and the texts didn't stop. They weren't constant, but always timed to hit when my guard slipped. A good morning greeting from a coworker would be followed by, "She thought you were her friend." A quiet evening at home would be interrupted with, "Funny how quickly people believe a story." I stopped going out after work, stopped answering calls I didn't recognize. My world shrank to the fluorescent box of the office and the shadowed quiet of my apartment. Even then, I couldn't escape the weight pressing on me. One Friday, while sorting files at my desk, I noticed a yellow sticky note tucked under my keyboard. 4 words in blocky handwriting. "You're not innocent either." My throat closed. Someone in the office, was playing this game. I scanned the room, but everyone looked normal, hunched over screens, sipping burnt coffee, tapping keyboards. If anyone noticed me stiffen, they didn't show it. I slipped the note into my pocket, palms slick with sweat. For the first time, I questioned whether I'd miscalculated. Claire was gone, yes, but maybe she hadn't been the only one playing dirty. Or maybe in pulling her down, I'd stepped into the same mud she'd dragged me through. That night, staring at the sticky note under the weak glow of my desk lamp at home, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't just being haunted, I was being hunted. The paranoia bled into everything. I found myself rereading old emails from coworkers, searching for coded digs that might have slipped past me before. every laugh across the room felt like it was about me. Every sudden silence when I entered the break room sounded like an accusation. Daniel called me into his office again, but this time his tone was different, softer. "You've been doing good work," he said, fingers drumming lightly on his desk. "But you seem distracted. Is everything okay?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? That someone was leaving cryptic notes and texts because I'd engineered Claire's downfall? That I was unraveling from the inside out? So I just nodded and muttered, "Yeah, just tired." He didn't press, but his eyes narrowed, and I knew he didn't believe me. That evening, when I got home, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one sentence, typed in bold. "The truth always comes out." I sat at my kitchen table, paper trembling in my hands, heart pounding against my ribs. For the first time, I considered that maybe I hadn't been clever. Maybe I just lit a fuse I couldn't control. And somewhere in the dark, I could almost hear Claire laughing. I thought about going to the police, reporting the messages, the note, the envelope. But what would I say? That someone knew I'd gotten a coworker fired? That I'd been stockpiling evidence like a vigilante and presented it to HR? None of it was illegal, not technically, but admitting it out loud would make me sound paranoid, or worse, guilty of something more. So I did nothing. I shoved the envelope in a drawer with the sticky note, buried them under unpaid bills and old receipts, and told myself ignoring it was safer. But ignoring didn't make it go away. The next week, I came into work to find my chair pulled out, my desk drawer left slightly open. Nothing was missing, but everything felt touched, violated. My skin crawled as I sat down, fingers brushing the cool metal of the handle. Had I forgotten to lock it? Or was someone trying to tell me they could get close anytime they wanted? At lunch, I overheard two coworkers whispering by the water cooler. Claire's appealing wrongful termination or something. My pulse spiked. If she was fighting back, maybe the messages were hers after all. But then, why not confront me directly? That night, another text lit up my phone as I lay in bed. "She's not the only one with receipts." I dropped the phone on my chest and stared at the ceiling, feeling the room close in. If this was a game of who held the sharper knife, I wasn't sure I was the one still holding the blade. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. The kind of rain that soaks everything in gray and makes the office windows feel like aquarium glass. I'd just returned from a client call when Daniel appeared again. His expression was grim. "Can you come with me?" He led me not to his office, but to the HR conference room. My stomach flipped. Inside, two HR reps sat with stiff smiles that didn't reach their eyes. On the table lay a folder, fat and heavy. "Leo," one of them began, voice careful, "a number of concerns have been raised regarding your conduct." The words barely registered over the roar in my ears. They slid the folder toward me. I opened it, and my heart stopped. Inside were printouts, emails, Slack messages, file logs. Not mine, Claire's. The same ones I'd given Daniel, except now, annotated, highlighted, reframed, twisted to suggest I'd manipulated, that I'd fabricated evidence to destroy her. The blood drained from my face. "This isn't," I started, but my voice cracked. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, worse. And in that moment, I realized someone hadn't just been haunting me. They'd been building their own file. The room closed in around me. My mouth went dry, and the fluorescent lights above seemed harsher than usual, buzzing like angry bees. I tried to steady my voice, but every word felt flimsy. "I didn't fabricate anything. I brought you the evidence as it was. She's the one who tampered with my files, not me." The HR rep tilted her head, hands folded neatly on the table. "That's your perspective, but Claire has filed an appeal and she's provided documentation that suggests otherwise." She gestured at the folder. We need to review this thoroughly before making any decisions. I wanted to laugh. Her documentation? The woman who'd built her entire office reputation on manipulation suddenly had credibility? But my laugh would have sounded too close to hysteria, so I swallowed it down. Am I under investigation? I asked finally. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding mine. That silence was worse than any yes. When they finally let me go, I returned to my cubicle feeling like I was walking underwater. Coworkers glanced up as I passed, their eyes lingering just a little too long, their smiles too tight. They knew something. Or maybe I was imagining it? Paranoia had blurred into reality so much that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Back at my desk, I opened my drawer and found another sticky note pressed neatly atop my notebook. This one had only 2 words, written in the same blocky handwriting as before. Checkmate, Leo. I didn't remember leaving the building. One minute I was staring at that note. The next I was outside in the rain, watching water streak down my jacket, soaking through my shoes. The city blurred in the downpour, but my mind was sharper than it had been in weeks. If Claire had appealed, if she'd flipped the script, then whoever had been leaving me those notes wasn't just tormenting me. They were helping her. I spent that weekend digging through every scrap of evidence I had left. Emails, logs, screenshots, anything that could prove I hadn't tampered with the files. But the more I sifted, the more it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. For every piece I found that cleared me, I imagined how easily it could be twisted, reframed, made to look like I was the manipulator. The text didn't stop. Sunday night, just as I was about to shut my laptop, another one flashed on the screen. Funny how truth bends when people want it to. I hurled the phone across the room. It clattered against the wall and landed face down on the carpet. I sat in the silence, chest heaving, until the glow of the screen lit up again. Another message. I crawled over, picked it up. This one just said, "See you Monday." Monday morning, the office buzzed with whispers louder than usual. People glanced at me and then looked away quickly as though eye contact might burn them. My stomach churned with every step toward my cubicle. When I reached it, the monitor was already on, though I'd shut it down Friday evening. A document was open on the screen. My file. My insurance folder. Every screenshot, every email, every note I'd ever saved sat there, exposed like a confession. Someone had gotten in. "Morning, Leo." A voice behind me made me flinch. It was Sarah, one of the junior analysts. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Rough weekend?" I stared at her, trying to read something in her expression, but she just strolled off toward the break room, humming softly. My chest tightened. Could it be her? Could it be anyone? I shut down the computer and yanked out the USB drive where I kept backups. The paranoia wasn't just in my head anymore. It was someone had broken in, crossed lines, and I had no way to prove it. By the time lunch rolled around, I could barely breathe in that office. The walls felt like they were leaning in, the whispers sharpening into knives. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, desperate for air, but waiting on the windshield of my car was another envelope. Hands trembling, I tore it open right there in the rain. Inside was a single photo. Me, sitting in my apartment, laptop open, lit only by the screen's glow. The picture was taken from outside my window. My heart dropped. This wasn't just office politics anymore. Someone was watching me at home. My sanctuary had been pierced, my privacy shattered. I scanned the parking lot, searching for anyone lingering too long, but all I saw were coworkers rushing through the drizzle, umbrellas bobbing like dark mushrooms. I stuffed the photo back in the envelope and drove aimlessly for hours. Every car behind me felt like it was following. Every face at a red light looked like it lingered too long. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel by the time I pulled back into my building. Inside my apartment, I closed every curtain, shoved a chair under the door handle, and sat on the couch in the dark. The photo lay on the table in front of me, taunting me. Whoever this was, they weren't just trying to scare me. They were proving they could reach me anywhere. That night, I didn't sleep at all. By Tuesday, the cracks were impossible to hide. My hands shook during meetings. My answers came too slow. My eyes darted to the door every time it opened. Daniel finally called me in again. "You don't look well," he said carefully. His tone wasn't accusatory. It was almost pitying, which felt worse. "If you need time off, take it. But right now, with the investigation..." He trailed off, his meaning clear. A leave of absence. Voluntary exile before they forced my hand. I nodded mutely, words lodged in my throat. As I packed up my things, coworkers tried to offer polite smiles, but I saw the relief in their eyes. One less storm cloud to hover over the office. One more reminder that no one wanted to be next. At home, I sank onto the couch, surrounded by silence, and stared at the boxes of files I'd carried with me. All my careful documentation, all my insurance, and yet somehow I was the one who'd lost everything. Another buzz. Another text. "Told you it wasn't over." I spent the next 2 days inside my apartment, blinds drawn, every sound amplified by my nerves. The groan of pipes in the walls sounded like footsteps. The hum of the refrigerator felt like whispered voices. I barely ate. I barely moved. I just sat surrounded by my notes, staring at them like they might rearrange into some pattern that would explain who was doing this to me. But the texts kept coming. Funny how guilt eats people alive. You think you're the hero, but you're not. Check the mirror if you want the truth. On the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked open my laptop, heart racing, and started drafting an email to Daniel. I wanted to spill everything. The texts, the notes, the photo outside my window. I wanted someone else to see the web I'd been caught in. But when I glanced at the corner of the screen, I froze. The webcam light was on. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. My laptop wasn't just a tool anymore. It was a window, turned against me. Someone was watching. I slammed it shut and threw it across the room, chest heaving. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window, pale and hollow-eyed. And I finally understood the message. Check the mirror if you want the truth. The next morning, I couldn't sit still. My walls weren't safe. Hey, my laptop wasn't safe. Even my phone vibrated in my hand like a venomous thing. Every part of my life had been infiltrated, twisted, used against me. I decided to fight back. I drove to an electronics store and bought a burner phone with cash. No credit card, no paper trail. At home, I powered it on and used it to set up a new email, one unlinked to anything I'd ever used before. From there, I started piecing together every scrap of evidence again. But this time, offline. Hard copies. No digital fingerprints to twist or corrupt. For hours, I worked feverishly, pages spreading across my kitchen table. It felt almost good, almost like control, until I noticed the envelope slipped under my door. My heart lurched. I hadn't heard anyone in the hall. Inside was another photo. This time of me at that very table, surrounded by my files. The angle was different. Higher, like it had been taken from inside the apartment. I dropped the envelope like it was on fire and staggered back. The thought clawed through me. Someone has been inside. I tore through the apartment, flinging open closets, yanking open cabinets. Every shadow looked like it could be hiding a person. Sweat dripped into my eyes, my breath ragged. I didn't find anyone. But when I stopped, I realized my hands were trembling so hard that I could barely grip the doorknob. That night, I slept in the bathtub with the shower curtain drawn, clutching a kitchen knife like it was a lifeline. Every creak in the building felt like someone inching closer. I dozed in fits, jerking awake at the slightest sound. When dawn finally came, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't words. It was the photo from the night before, the one of me at my table. Only now there was a caption typed across it. You can't hide from yourself. I felt sick. Whoever this was, they weren't just trying to destroy me at work. They wanted to break me down completely, mind, body, soul, and worse, it was working. By Friday, the line between reality and paranoia was razor thin. I saw faces in the windows across the street, shadows that moved when I blinked. I unplugged my TV, dismantled my Wi-Fi router, even pulled the batteries out of every device I owned. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That afternoon, Daniel called. His voice was tense, clipped. HR is finalizing their review. We'll need you to come in on Monday. I wanted to argue to defend myself, but the words tangled in my throat. All I managed was a strangled, okay. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking again. Monday felt like a sentence being handed down. That evening, as I sat in the dark, another envelope slid under the door. My chest tightened as I picked it up. Inside was no photo this time, just a single line typed in bold. On Monday, you'll confess. Monday arrived like a storm cloud. I hadn't slept more than an hour. I dressed mechanically, every motion heavy, and drove to the office with my stomach twisted in knots. The building loomed ahead, glass reflecting the morning sun, but all I saw was a trap waiting to snap shut. Inside, Daniel and the HR reps were waiting. A thick folder lay on the table, heavier than before. My chair screeched as I sat, the sound cutting sharp through the silence. Leo, the HR rep began, her tone clinical. We've reviewed the evidence. Before we proceed, we'd like to give you the chance to explain yourself. My throat was dry. I looked at the folder, at their expectant eyes, and felt the weight of every note, every photo, every message pressing down on me. My chest ached with the urge to scream that it wasn't me, that I wasn't the villain here, that someone else had been orchestrating this entire nightmare. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at it under the table. The message froze my blood. Tell them everything, or I will. The room was so quiet I could hear the HVAC breathing through the vents. I felt every molecule of air scrape my throat as I said, I have something to add. 4 heads tipped toward me. The HR rep folded her hands, patient, expectant. Daniel's jaw worked like he was grinding a pebble behind his teeth. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't look. I stared at the folder, at the halo of highlighter and red pen, and I made a choice I couldn't unmake. I didn't fabricate anything, I said, voice low but steady. Claire sabotaged me. She altered files, shifted blame. I documented it because I knew nobody would believe me otherwise. A pause, a swallow. But I baited her once. I left a draft accessible to see if she'd tamper with it, and she did. The words clanged inside me. The truth didn't taste clean. It tasted like metal. The HR rep's pen stopped moving. You set a trap. I set a mirror, I said, heat rising. She'd been doing it to me for months. I needed proof. I forced myself to meet their eyes. It doesn't excuse it. I crossed a line. I hate that I crossed it, but I didn't forge anything. Daniel leaned back, expression pulled tight. Why didn't you come to me before that? I did, in pieces, I said. I hinted. I asked for access logs. I tried to make noise without sounding like I was unraveling. My laugh came out cracked. By the time I realized how deep it went, I'd already started documenting everything. And then it felt like if I stopped, I'd fall straight through the floor. Silence stretched. The HR rep finally nodded once like she was pinning the moment to a board. We'll need to corroborate your claim about file access. IT can confirm edit history across the shared drives. She tapped the folder. For now, we're pausing any final actions. You're still on leave. My phone pulsed in my palm again. I slipped it out beneath the table. 1 text, 2 words. Roof. Tonight. I slid the phone away and felt something awful and inevitable settling into its chair beside me, like it had been invited all along. I nodded, thanked them, and rose. No one stopped me as I walked out, the hallways humming like a held breath. Outside, rain slicked the pavement into a dark mirror. I could see my own outline in it, blurred, doubled, and I knew I was going to meet whoever had been writing to me. I just didn't know which version of myself they were going to speak to. My building's stairwell smelled like damp concrete and old paint. Each step up to the roof echoed in the metal cage of the stairwell, a hollow, tinny rhythm that made me feel exposed. I reached the final landing and pushed the rusted door. It scraped open with a scream. The roof was a sprawl of gravel and puddles, HVAC units breathing like sleeping dogs. City lights shimmered on the slick surfaces. There, near the low parapet, stood a figure in a dark rain jacket, hood up. The wind worried the edges of the fabric, making it flutter like a flag about to come down. "You came," the figure said, a woman's voice. Familiar. "Who are you?" My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. She pushed the hood back. Rain stippled brown hair into darker lines across her forehead. Sarah, junior analyst, the hummingbird of the office. Quick, bright, forgettable until she wasn't. Something cold slid down my spine. It was you. It had to be. She didn't move closer. You weren't going to tell the whole truth otherwise. My throat tightened. You sent the notes, the envelopes, the photos. The notes, yes. She lifted a hand palm open, like she was showing me she wasn't carrying anything sharp. The envelope on your windshield, yes. The photo from outside your window. The fire escape across your courtyard lines up with your kitchen. Don't flatter yourself. I didn't break in. Her mouth quirked, humorless. Your blinds were open. I swallowed. Anger rose, but it had nowhere to go. Why? She let out a breath that steamed in the chill. Because Claire did it to me too, just quieter. I kept eating it and telling myself it was seasoning. You were the first person who didn't just swallow. Her gaze sharpened. But you were becoming her to beat her. And if you walked into HR pretending you were spotless, they'd smell the lie and torch the whole thing, including anyone else she'd hurt. I wasn't pretending. You were rationalizing, she said gently. So was I. So was everyone. Wind tugged at the fringe of her hood. She watched me with a strange mixture of apology and resolve. I compiled my own file. Not against you, against the pattern. I gave HR a copy anonymous, and I've got more. I didn't want to ruin you. I wanted you to tell the truth so they couldn't spin it as a vendetta. I stared at her, rain needling my face. You could have just talked to me. I tried, she said, voice barely above the wind. You were a storm by then. A siren wailed several blocks away, thin and distant. Sarah shoved her hands into her pockets, hunched against the rain. There's one more thing. IT pulled logs. Claire had an accomplice. Someone who ghost edited from outside the office network. Disposable accounts. VPN hops. Sloppy in places. I think I know who. Who? She looked past me, then back, eyes steady. Evan, the photographer. Whatever he was. He picked her up twice a week. He was in our lobby a lot. He had time. A name dropped into the pool of my mind, and ripples met all my earlier suspicions. The photo's angle, the patient cruelty, someone who enjoyed the frame as much as the subject. It fit too neatly. It terrified me. What do we do? I asked. She gave me a small, tired smile. We walk into HR tomorrow, together, with both files and a statement that doesn't make either of us a saint. And then we let the truth ricochet where it needs to. Can you do that? I looked out at the city, at lights smeared by rain into long, wavering lines. Yeah, I said. I can do that. Good, she said, pulling up her hood again. Because he's going to poke you tonight. He'll want you cornered. Don't take the bait. We'll bring the mirror in the morning. Her footsteps receded toward the stairwell. I stayed on the roof until my shirt clung to my skin and my anger cooled into something that looked almost like resolve. When I finally headed down, my phone buzzed. Confess, the message read, or I publish the rest. I wiped rain from my screen with the back of my hand, and for the first time, I didn't answer the voice baiting my fear. I answered the one that sounded like me. I slept in fragments, dreams like broken plates. Glints of the office, the roof, the hallway outside my door, Claire's pale face the day she left. Dawn arrived as a wash of pale light through the blinds I had finally shut. Coffee tasted like burnt rope. I shaved with a hand that didn't quite feel connected to my arm. In the lobby elevator, Sarah stood at the back, eyes forward. We didn't speak. Our silence felt like a pact. Not secrecy, but discipline. The doors slid open on our floor and the office air met us. Copier toner, reheated oatmeal, and the metallic tang of everyone not quite looking at us. HR had already assembled the room. Same table, same folder, a new stack of printouts beside it. Daniel nodded once when we entered. The HR rep offered a cautious, diplomatic smile to Sarah. Thank you for joining us. Sarah's voice was steady. I'd like to add my statement to Leo's. We sat. I unfolded my pages. My hands didn't shake this time. I described the pattern again, but without varnish. The slights, the edits, the trap I set, and how it worked because it reflected a real behavior. Sarah followed with hers. Instances where she'd been recut mid-project. Emails that cast doubt on her competence. Little redirects that added up to a resculpting of reality with Claire always holding the chisel. Then Sarah slid over a list of lobby camera timestamps. Evan's visits. How they coincided with after-hours edit events on shared files. IT joined by speakerphone, voices tinny and precise. We can confirm edits originated from a device not registered with the company, accessing via Claire's credentials, but with IPs tied to a residential ISP 2 blocks from this building. We're working with counsel to request subscriber information. HR's pen moved fast suddenly. Daniel's eyes flicked between us and the papers like he was watching a magician explain a trick he'd applauded too long. Why didn't you come forward sooner? He asked Sarah. I feared becoming the next punchline, Sarah said simply. And I feared becoming Claire. The HR rep pressed her lips together. Here's what happens next. We pause Claire's appeal and reopen our investigation to include third-party access. We'll also be issuing a directive that personal accounts can't be used for work. Separately, she turned to me. Leo, you set a deliberate scenario to solicit misconduct. While we understand your reasons, it is a violation of our expectations. The consequence will be formal. A written warning and mandatory training if you remain with us. Remain. The word hung like an option I hadn't been sure I still had. My phone skittered against the wood. Another text flashed. They're lying for you. I faced the table and didn't flinch. The HR rep noticed the distraction and raised a brow. I set my phone face down like you might lay a knife on the table, palms open. Whoever's been messaging me may escalate, I said. I won't engage. Forward everything to us, she said. From now on, we work through counsel. When the meeting ended, Daniel asked me to stay. He waited until the door clicked shut. You should have told me when it started, he said, softer than before. I thought I'd sound paranoid, I said. Sometimes you have to risk sounding human, he said, and it landed somewhere deeper than the admonishment meant to. I walked out into a hallway that suddenly felt navigable again. Sarah was waiting by the window, sunlight striping her shoes. You did good, she said. So did you. She gave a small nod, then winced at her phone. You might want to avoid your inbox for a bit, she said dryly. Because of him? Because of all of them, she said, and I understood. Gossip was a character actor in our office. It always got a line. My pocket buzzed again as I reached my desk. Last chance. I looked up at the ceiling tiles, exhaled, and let the message pass through me. I wasn't an empty house anymore. Evan didn't like being ignored. That evening, as dusk pressed blue against the windows, a knock came at my apartment door. Soft, polite, almost gentle. It raised every hair on my arms. I didn't open it. Who is it? Neighbor, a man's voice said. Warm, amiable. It could have sold cameras. I stared through the peephole. A man in a denim jacket, hair too artfully messy to be accidental, looked down at his phone like he was bored even by the moment he was creating. I didn't breathe. Wrong door, I said, and my own voice sounded wrong. Lower, steadier than I felt. He chuckled, a stage chuckle. Oh, right, forgive me, I get lost sometimes. His hand lifted, and for a heartbeat I saw the edge of a camera strap under the jacket. He looked up directly into the peephole, not seeing me but knowing I was there because the scene needed an audience. By the way, he said softly, the blinds thing? Smart. Shame about the lens. He waited. I swallowed a curse. He let the silence sit. Then his footsteps drifted away, slow and theatrical, down the hall. I didn't move for a long time. When I did, it was to call Sarah. She picked up on the second ring. He came to my door, I said. I'm calling HR's counsel, she said immediately. Document the time, date. Don't respond to him. If he tries again, we call the police. I hung up and wrote it down with the shaky precision of someone diffusing their own heartbeat. The apartment felt like it was folding inward. I walked room to room, touching corners, reminding myself what was mine. The kitchen window, the mug with a chip on the rim, the plant drooping in the living room because I couldn't remember when I'd last watered it. I poured water until the soil darkened, watched it drink. The texts stopped. The quiet wasn't peace. It was the feeling of a predator switching positions. The next morning, IT emailed HR. HR emailed us. Council emailed everyone. The ISP returned subscriber information, an address, Evan's name. The dotted line between edits and visits etched itself in black and white. Claire's appeal was formally suspended pending additional findings. I read the thread twice, chest loosening by increments I hadn't trusted myself to measure. Daniel's message came separately. Let's talk about your return plan, and your boundaries, and mine. Boundaries. The word felt like a door I could install on the inside. I turned my phone over. No new messages from the number that had been my haunting. The screen reflected my face, wrecked sure, but mine again. I exhaled. I didn't realize until then that I'd been holding my breath since the first note appeared. That night I slept. Not long, not deep. But when I woke, for the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for my phone like it was the only light left. I reached for my own voice and found it where I'd left it. Quiet, intact, ready to be used for something other than defending the walls. Returning to the office felt like stepping back into a story I'd left mid-chapter. People glanced, smiled carefully, overshot me with their eyes like I was a bright light. Someone had brought donuts. Glaze shone under fluorescent bulbs. The normalness of it made my throat ache. HR called a brief all hands. The message was sterile but firm. New security protocols, zero tolerance for credential sharing, a clearer path to escalate bullying behavior without fear of retaliation. Names were not named. The room's attention gathered and scattered like iron filings across a hidden magnet. I caught Sarah's gaze across the crowd. She looked tired in that good way, like a runner at the tape. Afterward, Daniel closed his office door and gestured for me to sit. He had a paper in front of him, the formal warning. He slid it over. I read it. My name looked heavier in that font. This is real, he said. And it doesn't erase that what you exposed is real too. I know, I said. Both can be true. He nodded. You'll take the training. Your workload will be adjusted for a month. You'll meet with our EAP counselor. And you'll document, but you'll escalate instead of playing detective. His smile was quick, human. And I will listen the first time you say the floor is shifting under you. I signed. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet. When I handed it back, relief didn't flood me. It seeped. That was enough. On my walk home, the city smelled like warm rain on dust. That first clean scent that only lasts a few minutes. My phone buzzed. I looked down and froze. Unknown number. My heart tripped, but the message that waited wasn't a threat. You did the right thing the hard way. No signature, no demand. Just a sentence landing like a small, folded note on my kitchen table. Not a trap, but a benediction. For a second, I wondered if it was Sarah, and then I realized it didn't matter. My life didn't have to be oriented around unmasking ghosts. It had to be oriented around not becoming one. That night, I opened my laptop. The webcam light glowed, then clicked off as the system cycled up. I watched the tiny dot go dark and felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, not absolution, but a workable place to stand. I opened a blank document and started to write the story I'd been living. Not for HR, not for court, but for the part of me that needed to hear it told true. I got her fired, I typed, and then I let the rest come slow, patient, honest. I wrote about beige walls and burnt coffee and the way cruelty can look like kindness if you're not careful. I wrote about the trap I set and the one I walked into, about Sarah's rooftop voice and Daniel's quiet apology disguised as policy. I wrote until the shape of it felt right in my hands. When I stopped, the room was quiet except for the refrigerator's soft hum. The plant on the shelf had perked, leaves angled toward the pale spill of streetlight through the blinds. My phone rested face down, a settled stone. I stood, stretched, and turned off the kitchen light. From the window, the city glowed. Not a stage, not a threat, just a place. I watched the rain polish the street a little cleaner, and I could almost feel the next chapter waiting. Not behind me, not ahead of me, but inside the fact that I had finally told it true. And when my phone buzzed one last time, a single silent vibration against the wood, I didn't pick it up right away. I let it be another sound in a night that finally didn't need me to narrate my own fear to make sense. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds in thin golden stripes, cutting across my living room like fresh brushstrokes. It startled me at first, not because of the light itself, but because I realized it was the first time in weeks I'd woken to something other than dread. No buzzing phone. No envelope under the door. Just silence, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was clean. I poured myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table where so much of this mess had unfolded. The stacks of evidence, the fear-soaked nights, the photos that had turned my home into a cage. Now the table was empty except for the mug warming my hands. I stared at it for a long while, breathing in steam, and for once nothing about the quiet seemed hostile. It was just a moment. Mine. On my walk to work, the city felt changed, though I knew it hadn't. The same buses hissed at curbs, the same shops rolled up their shutters, the same sidewalks carried the same tired footsteps. But something inside me had shifted. Every face I passed wasn't a potential threat anymore. They were just people, each with their own stories, their own private battles I'd never see. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like prey. At the office, Sarah caught my eye and gave a small nod. Nothing more, nothing less, but it was enough. A pact unspoken. We'd both walked through fire, and though the flames had left marks, they hadn't consumed us. Daniel stopped by later with a brief, almost casual, "Good work." And I realized that sometimes healing looks like the return of the ordinary. Beige walls, burnt coffee, two bright lights. It was all still here. But now it didn't feel like a prison. it felt like a place to start over. That night back at my apartment, I picked up my phone when it buzzed. For a heartbeat, my chest tightened, expecting the old dread. But it was just a weather alert. I laughed, the sound startling in my own ears. And when I set the phone back down, face first on the table, I whispered the truth I'd been circling all along. I got her fired, and I'm finally learning how to live with it. And that's where we'll leave it tonight, my Reddit story lovers. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. A story of betrayal, paranoia, and the haunting weight of choices we can't undo. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Bedtime Blocks, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well, dream easy, and I'll see you in the next story.